We got a good video for you today. I've just been alerted that somebody called HillBillyBlueBalls has done a video relating to gas pressure. And HillBillyBlueBalls thinks that gas pressure doesn't need a container. Yet every demonstration that he's ever shown, especially the one that went up the side of his house, used a container to get the pressure. And when he was requested to do the same test again without the container, obviously he couldn't do it, but he pretended that it wasn't necessary because it didn't have a lid. That same guy is now going to use gas pressure in a container to try and make a point about gravity. And, well, let's put it this way. It's called lying. He's about to ascribe to gravity something that he should be, well, being honest about. I'm going to play the clip he says first, and I'm going to tell you that the issue is when he says it's being influenced by gravity. Nothing gets influenced by gravity because gravity is not a force. Thanks, Einstein.
We cool them down.
Now, in order for the gas molecules to rise, they have to be buoyant in contrast to something else.
Bob is somehow trying to suggest that gas needs a more dense gas to float on top of in order for it to rise, which is absolute nonsense. Our atmosphere doesn't separate itself out into its constituents. If you put compressed air in a cylinder, it doesn't separate out into its constituents. That is just an absolutely ridiculous notion.
I don't want to dwell on this point too long, but Blue Marble Science says that the atmospheric gases don't separate out. Well, this video demonstrates that that can actually happen. A nearby volcano erupted, a load of CO2 was emitted from the volcano, and he was highlighting the dangers of going into deep grass or deep craters, because they're often filled with the more dense gas, relative density, more dense gas. And although it doesn't stay there forever, it stays there long enough that if you happen to walk in these low areas whilst you're out being a kid, you're going to end up succumbing to carbon dioxide, because there's going to be no air in there, no oxygen in there for you to breathe. You're going to pass out and you're dead. And he's demonstrating that the gases will separate out, but obviously it's only for a short period of time. And this is exactly what was happening in Blue Marble Science's butane container that he thinks wasn't a container. The butane was sat below the air because the butane was more dense than the air that was around it. And for a period of time it'll stay there. Now obviously he had a narrow opening at the top. That changes the diffusal rate. In the air it's a lot faster. But nonetheless, this video demonstrates what was happening with HillBillyBlueBalls' butane observation test that wasn't in a container because it didn't have a lid.
Let's look at a little demonstration here. We have two gas columns. Each column has two chambers, and the chambers are separated at the moment by a barrier. The column on the left has bromine gas in the bottom chamber, and on the right the bromine is in the top chamber. When those barriers are removed, the two gases will mix, and you'll see that the only difference is the speed with which they mix. And that rate of diffusion is being influenced by Earth's gravity. In the column on the left, gravity is actually slowing down the rate of diffusion. In the column on the right, gravity helps the rate of diffusion. But over time, both columns will achieve a uniform mixture of all the gases that are in that column. Oxygen molecules will bounce off nitrogen molecules or bromine molecules or CO2 molecules, but no gas presents a barrier to any other gas. Gas molecules will continue moving randomly in all directions, bumping into other gas molecules or into the walls of the container until they fill the entire volume available to them. I don't know how Bob can get this that wrong.
So he basically debunks his own gas pressure with the tube up the side of his house video, because he just freely admits that the gas pressure molecules will continuously bounce off each other until they fill the volume. Well, in his video when he had the pipe going up the side of his house, he didn't have a lid on it. So as he correctly points out in this video, because it suits his narrative, given enough time, they will balance themselves out. There will be almost a homogeneous medium, a density medium that is pretty much consistent. He admits it in this video because it suits his narrative, but in his gas pressure without a container video that he completely and utterly lied about and he still has up on his channel today, deceiving people with, he thinks that it'll stay there forever. So which is it, Hillbilly Blue Balls? Is it that the gas pressure will equalise out given time and you debunk your previous video on gas pressure without a container? Or is it that you're being dishonest now because it suits your narrative to be dishonest, because now you're admitting that that's what will happen? It's a rhetorical question. I know he'll never ever concede or admit that he's wrong. But let's just be clear, Bob is getting some things wrong, obviously. I think he's the first one to realise and admit and acknowledge. No, he's definitely the first one to realise he's got it wrong, but he'll never admit it because, well, in my opinion, Bob's just a controlled agent, in my opinion. I don't believe that Bob's here because of honest intentions. I believe Bob's here to deceive people into thinking stuff that either he can't accept is wrong, or it's deliberately to cause confusion. Bob is getting stuff wrong. So is Hillbilly Blue Balls. In this video, he said that the gravity was influencing the direction or the rate of the diffusion. Well, I put the atomic weight values of the gases on screen so that the audience immediately could see. I used the atomic weight numbers of bromine and the air. Air's mainly nitrogen and oxygen. It's got an approximate value of around about 7 to 8 because most of it's that. And bromine is number 35. Now he says, Hillbilly Blue Ball says, that influenced by gravity changing the rate of the diffusion. Well, we know that gravity is not influencing Jack. Thanks, Einstein. So what is the cause? Well, when you look at the relative densities or the relative atomic numbers, and let's just be really clear so that we're clear with our terminology. Atomic weight is defined as relative atomic mass, the ratio of the average mass of the chemical's element atoms to some standard. Since 1961, the standard unit of atomic mass has been 1/12 the mass of an atom of the isotope carbon-12. The key bit to notice is that it's relative atomic mass. They're not using weight in the way that physics normally uses weight, because weight is mass times little g, the acceleration due to gravity. But they expressly state that it's a relative atomic mass. Not Einstein's theory of general relativity, Bob, relative to each other. So because the relative numbers, that gives us the answer. So on the one hand, you've got Hillbilly Blue Balls that uses a convenient argument when it suits his narrative, telling you that gravity is influencing the dispersal rate. But we know gravity is not a force. On the other hand, I'm telling you that the cause of the diffusion rate is the relative mass, the relative atomic number values. And because the gas molecules bounce around in all directions, that is the reason why the diffusal rate is the way it is. It's got nothing to do with gravity. It's all down to its relative mass. Now, this takes me back to the 2-litre bottle of pop. 2-litre bottle of pop, as we see on screen, has a very small narrowing at the top. When the lid's left off, it goes flat after a few days. The carbonization process uses carbon dioxide to carbonate the drink. Well, if we use the relative atomic numbers of carbonated drinks relative to the air that we're in, you can see that carbon dioxide is, again, like bromine, is more dense than the medium it's in. So it should never go up. It should never come out the bottle. It should never go flat. And remember, we're in a gravitational field on their model. So not only do you have the gas molecules that are more dense than the medium, just like the bromine, you've also got the gravitational pull that we're supposed to be in, that's supposed to be pulling down. Yet in both examples, we see that there is no apparent downward bias. Because if there was, there would not be the separation. If there was, there would be the gradient towards the bottom obviously, kind of like it was before the divide was created, there might be a little bit of infusion somewhere up the way, but it would be obvious that the more denser stuff was being gravitationally attracted, and there would be a bias. So this essentially is two birds with the one stone. HillBillyBlueBalls is lying to you by telling you it's being influenced by gravity when it isn't. The correct interpretation is the atomic relative numbers, and he's also debunking his earlier video because he's showing that given enough time, and he admits it, given enough time, it will disperse, it will evenize, it'll level itself out.
Both columns will achieve a uniform mixture of all the gases that are in that column. Oxygen molecules will bounce off nitrogen molecules or bromine molecules or CO2 molecules, but no gas presents a barrier to any other gas. Gas molecules will continue moving randomly in all directions, bumping into other gas molecules or into the walls of the container until they fill the entire volume available to them. I don't know how Bob can get this that wrong.
And I don't know how HillBillyBlueBalls can argue that gas pressure will not immediately evacuate into the infinite volume of space. Thanks, Hillbilly, you've debunked yourself, and indirectly, unintentionally, and totally fantastically, you prove, because you lied about gravity, again, the actual difference between the two gases is their atomic weight. By definition, it's their relative mass to each other. Have a really great day.